Just on a related note, we were at IBM with Phil Scott the other day, and Janet Lombardi made a big point about their inability to find Vermonters who have two-year technical degrees. Said they were really pushing the Department of Education to raise math standards, but said, you know, a two-year degree, that's it, and you can write your ticket largely and earn a very good living at IBM. What's your reaction to that?
You know, I had spoken extensively with both leadership at IBM Essex Junction as well as the leadership of IBM Central Headquarters down in Vermont. I was down there 2 weeks ago because IBM's just a core employer for Vermont. And I have restarted the annual meetings that governors have with leadership down there. We discussed a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities for Vermont. I want to keep growing IBM here. But I think there's no better example of what I've said so many times. When I go out and talk to employers, they say to me, Governor, we have jobs. We just can't find enough Vermonters trained to do those jobs. And I say that's why the three-point plan that the Shumlin administration has put together to grow jobs and economic opportunities for Vermonters is so on target. Connecting Vermont so that we can join the rest of the world in closing the connectivity gap and growing jobs, getting healthcare costs under control. Third, and perhaps most important, from early childhood education to higher education to workforce retraining, ensuring that our graduates are graduating with skills in science, technology, math, and engineering. And as Janet will tell you, you can make $60,000 out of the box with an associate's degree at IBM right now, openings today, if you can do some math. And that's why the Secretary, the Commissioner, soon to be Secretary of Education, and I felt so strongly, I don't mean that individual, but I mean the position, felt so strongly about changing the requirements in Vermont. You know, it's shocking to learn that almost half of Vermont kids aren't taking Algebra 1 in 9th grade because we don't require it. That the number drops down to 27% taking geometry. Come on, this is the cutting. So raising standards, recommitting ourselves to the best educational outcomes is going to determine our job future. And it's not just IBM, it is this challenge. That's why we say bring it back to Vermont. We want to bring back those graduates that think we don't have jobs here because we do.
I suspect a lot of parents would be surprised to hear, and this would be a wake-up call for those folks.
You'd think so, and you know it's a challenge we all share together. Vermont's doing well on the standardized tests for English and the arts. We're not doing so well for math and science, and we've got to change that.
On the issue of overtime in the last week, have you learned anything about what kind of oversight there is in the state police or the state?
Well, let me tell you what we're doing in terms of the challenge that we're facing right now with the allegations against both the state police officer and the larger question of overtime. On the investigation, criminal investigation into the former officer, who is accused of ripping off taxpayer dollars, padding pay, totally unacceptable. We are expecting within the next 3 weeks to have a thorough review completed that covers the past 6 years, which is how long our statute of limitations covers, of any time sheets submitted by him to the department, as well as any actions of anyone in a supervisory role over that officer. So we're moving quickly, we're moving diligently. As I said, it is totally unacceptable of this administration or any administration for people to steal taxpayer dollars, and we're all over it. Second, in terms of the greater challenge of figuring out how well we're doing on overtime, I want to give you the history, and I will tell you what we're doing. The history is that when I came into office, 2011 fiscal year, I inherited half of the 2011 fiscal year, I remind you, from Governor Douglas, and I had half of it bestowed upon me when I took office in January. In that fiscal year, half of the previous administration and half of ours, we found that overtime pay generally was up about 12%, unacceptably high increase over the previous year. So the Secretary of Administration, who I don't mind reminding you was the former treasurer and is all over these issues, and I got together and said, this is totally unacceptable. We brought together our leadership team, commissioners, secretaries, made very clear that 12% increases in overtime were not sustainable, that it wasn't acceptable, and had to be fixed. I'm proud to say that by the full fiscal year that we managed, a year later, we succeeded in turning the curve. If you remove overtime paid because of Hurricane Irene, and I don't think there's a Vermonter out there that would have said, hey, please don't pay overtime to transportation workers for rebuilding over 500 miles of roads and 34 bridges and getting people out of harm's way. If you remove that expense, by 2012, we had no increase over the previous year. So we made great progress. Now, in terms of the overall oversight and overtime question, let's remember these facts. During the last administration, as you know, during tough economic times, saw the loss of over 600 state employees. I felt that as I said during the campaign and said again as governor, that we had cut down to the bone in terms of laying off state employees, maybe to the point where it was penny wise and pound foolish, because we still have to clear the roads, we still have to protect the public safety when there's a crime, and you gotta get out there and do those jobs. Now that year we had the blizzard of February, the biggest blizzard in the history of Vermont. We had all kinds of natural disaster storms. Bottom line is, we have looked very carefully at overtime challenges. We hired state employees to reduce the need for overtime, and we will continue to diligently manage overtime so that Vermont taxpayers aren't paying one penny more than is necessary for overtime.
What warrants an investigation from the Department of Human Resources to look into any overtime claims? Is it the smallest thing? What warrants an investigation?
Well, I think an investigation is warranted by alleged criminal activity, and that's what we have here. So there's a three-point process going on. The first is the criminal investigation I just referred to, going back 6 years, in terms of the officer who's accused of the crimes committed, and obviously looking into any supervisory roles that might have lapsed or not done their job in the 6-year period. Second, we are launching an audit with Auditor Salmon, and I've offered independent resources to bring in independent auditors to help with that investigation to do two things. The first is go back 6 months for any timesheets at Williston as a first look to see if there are additional challenges there. The second is to authorize a look at all state police overtime for the last 3 months to see if we see any inconsistencies there. We'll do that quickly. We'll do it efficiently. It'll be a transparent process. When we get that done, we will then apply those same practices of ensuring that the public is not being ripped off to all of state government if we find there are any problems. Now, I want to be clear about this. So far, it is our belief, based upon what we've seen, that this is an isolated challenge. But we wouldn't be doing our job as governor, as an administration overseeing taxpayer dollars, if we didn't look at a much broader picture, and we will.
So let's say 2 years ago, one employee alleged that someone else was lying on their timesheets within another state department. Would that warrant an investigation? Is that something that should have maybe taken place if that type of conversation had gone on?
Yeah, let me tell you the history of the overtime oversight in Vermont. Back in 2007, it was determined with the auditor and the past administration that there weren't adequate checks and balances on timesheets and monitoring those timesheets. So the state of Vermont implemented a checks and balances system that's up to snuff, current, and progressive, that ensured that if the practices were followed, there would be no instance where someone could lie on their timesheet without a supervisor knowing about it. We implemented that system. What we're looking at now is, since it appears, it's alleged, that that system was abused, what went wrong? Was it a systems problem, or was it a personnel problem? I think we'll probably find it was a personnel problem, but we'll get back to you. What I can tell you is that I take any rip-off of taxpayer money allegations extremely seriously. That's my job as governor. We will leave no rock unturned, and we will be transparent as we go forward.
The OT issue in 2011, are you attributing that, half of which you inherited, to the layoffs of the previous administration? Is that what you were saying?
What I'm saying is that when I came in and I saw the spike in overtime, 12% a year, I had to ask the obvious question. Have we laid off so many state workers that they can't do their job, and therefore we have personnel working overtime and we're paying for that? And the conclusion, frankly, was yes. We went out and we hired more state employees. It just so happens that the following year we didn't see any increase in overtime. So I would suggest that we might have hit it right on the head. My point is, we've been on this overtime question since I was elected. Secretary Spalding, myself, and others in this administration. I'm a business person. Business people don't like paying overtime. I don't want taxpayers paying unnecessary overtime either, and I'm going to manage the state the same way I manage my business. The less overtime, the better.
So what do you make of on the top, that there are a couple of data points that came out last week. One was the list of the top 150 salary earners in the state, and then there was some data around how much overtime people are actually making. And I went through that over the weekend, and it appeared that about 50 individuals were from the Department of Public Safety out of, the top 150. And this seems like an awfully large number. Are you worried that we're overpaying our public safety officials in relationship? I mean, these are people who are making as much or more than commissioners and secretaries in state government, more than judges in some cases. What's going on?
I think it's really important that we understand from a management standpoint the complexities of managing an enterprise like the state of Vermont. Listen, if you work at the Department of Motor Vehicles, or if you work at the Agency of Natural Resources, you have a pretty predictable job. You should be able to get there at 7:38 in the morning and work an 8-hour day, occasionally a 9-hour day, and go home. If you work for public safety, you don't know how many crimes you're going to have, where you're going to be called out, or with what intensity they will be called out. So public safety will always have more overtime by virtue of their profession than many of the other sectors of state government. That's understandable. Taxpayers get that. If you have a slew of crimes, you're obviously going to have to pay more overtime than if you don't, and you can't predict a crime pattern, or you can't see going forward what the intensity of the demand is going to be. So you have to expect that public safety, the nature of a police officer's job, is always going to be less predictable, and the hours will be less predictable than in many other sectors of state government.
Governor, over the last 2 years, there were 2 officers that consistently each made more than, 2 sergeants in the state police that made consistently more than Colonel Esperance.
But one of them is under investigation right now. So.
Yes, I understand that. But you have these officers that are appearing repeatedly over years instead of random officers that might have had to respond to a crime spree or something random like that. Why are there officers that are staying on this list year to year?
Well, of the 2 you're mentioning, one is currently under investigation, so I'm not going to comment on that one. All I can tell you is that we have promised you a thorough review of all overtime. That's what we're doing right now with law enforcement, and we'll get back to you about whether we think there's irregularities or not.
So it's the same issue, though, maybe there's not enough of those people patrolling, so you have to pay for the overtime. It's always a situation with the third shift that you're filling with OT in these barracks.
Kate Duffy said something about, you're thinking about a third shift.
We have been looking at the third shift. That's expensive. And again, we want to be clear. Law enforcement is going to cost money. Law enforcement will have more overtime than any other sector of state government because you don't know how many crimes you're going to have, when they're going to happen, or how long and how many people are going to be called out to solve those challenges, protect the public. So what we're saying is 2 things. We're doing a thorough, open, transparent audit, intense audit. I, as governor, have promised additional resources where necessary, should the auditor need them, to get to the bottom of your questions. Second, don't expect that public safety will ever not be the biggest overtime sector of state government, because that's the nature of the job.
So I have a question about the total job numbers. In 2011, we had about 7,700 state employees, and now we have about 8,300. So it looks like there's been an increase in the number of total vacancies filled, or I'm not quite sure how the number
Well, you
went
gotta
up, but
remember-
now they're 80, it looks
You
like
gotta-
83, 73, and I'm just wondering.
I would urge you to go over with Secretary Spaulding and Kate Duffy those numbers, because don't forget that with every $100 million that we pick up to, as an example, implement the federal health care reform bill, we pick up hundreds of, or dozens and dozens of state employees that are funded by federal dollars doing a job that we didn't have before. So I would ask you to go out, look at what we're doing relating to federal legislation that we weren't doing a year ago, and also look at the areas where we've been very honest about having to hire back state workers so that we wouldn't be paying overtime like we were.
What
But
about
those
an
are the two
example?
drivers.
What about an example?
And get the job done. As you know, when we took over, we had some real backlogs with some of our most vulnerable Vermonters. And I went out to the legislature and said, listen, we have to hire people to do these jobs. The number of state employees we have, we can't get it done. So those are the things that drive it.
What about the lottery example, what Randy Brock brought up, that there aren't a lot of lottery emergencies to seem to fall in the category of that kind of job where you can show up at a given time and expect to get out at a given time.
We're looking at why that is, but all I can tell you is if you look at the dollar amounts versus the percentage, the lottery overtime is a teeny fraction of our overtime charged in the state.
There was a deputy treasurer's office that made a lot in overtime, like more than 30,000.
You should
They're in the
try.
top five, and that seems like an awful lot of overtime for someone who's at a desk job. And there were two.
Well, I just got to tell you, in fairness to your governor, ask me about the areas of state government that I control, and ask other constitutional officers about the areas that they control, but I'm not going to comment on the areas they control. I don't manage their departments.
But at the end of this 3-week investigation, you would expect to know whether some supervisors are in
Let me
trouble?
be clear on the timeline. What we hope to have in 3 weeks is the completion of our 6-year evaluation of the timesheets related to the former officer that is alleged to have ripped off the public. As quickly as possible, we hope to have both a 3-month and a 6-month look back at 6 months at the Williston Barracks and 3 months at all throughout public safety. Then we will use that information to determine whether we have a problem, how serious the problem is, and whether we should then go look at all agencies of state government.
Do you expect some change in personnel at the top of state police? How much say do you have in that?
Well, let me first say that there's no one who's worked harder, more diligently, and with more vigor to solve the problem than Commissioner Flynn. And he and Colonel Westbranch are doing an extraordinary job with this challenge. Having said that, we're not going to make any conclusions about anything until we know the facts. We don't know them yet.
Do you control who's the colonel or who's in charge of state police?
Well, ultimately, I'm in charge. The buck stops with me. If there's problems, it's my fault. If things go well, maybe I'll get a little bit of credit.
Governor, Keith Flynn is supposedly out of the office till July 30th. Is that a personal vacation, or what is, why is he gone?
I can't answer that question. I don't know the answer. I can find that out for you.
Okay, and I also heard that
July 30 is not very far away, but
I also heard that former Sergeant Deeghan was responsible for signing off on the overtime sheets related to the Jericho contract, as well as some of the officers on his shift. Was he responsible? Is it possible that he was the only one responsible for his own sheets, or was there definitely someone above him?
we hope in 3 weeks to complete our investigation and we'll know all the answers to those questions.
So Governor, you won't look at other state departments only if you find an issue with state police? Did I hear that right?
What you heard was that we are doing the obvious. First, looking at where we have the alleged problems, which is the alleged problems are obviously with the state police at this point. Once we get the facts of whether this was an isolated incident or whether there's other signs of any kind of impropriety we will then make a determination of whether we look at all segments of state government or whether we think with confidence that we have completed the mission.
And the same goes with procedure of how they fill out overtime, correct?
We're obviously looking at every single possible opportunity for abuse to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
What is the protocol now for sign-offs sometimes?
Protocol now is, it was put in place in this 2007 review, that there is no timesheet that doesn't get reviewed by a supervisor before that state employee is paid. Reviewed and verified.
Although the assertion is that did not happen in Deeghan's case, that's what the court document said.
Let's see the entire report, and then we'll know what went wrong where.
But to the broader question of the pre-press review that had a lot of six-figure salaries in the state government. It wasn't too long ago, the state government was the low payer.
Well, you know, what I
They
want
look awfully generous to, as you've said 100 times, the average Vermonter who hasn't had a pay raise in many years. What about the underlying concern that the taxpayers are funding a whole lot of fat salaries?
I think that Vermonters understand that we run the leanest, most efficient state government, among the leanest, most efficient state governments in the country, and we do. Listen, I can remember back when Governor Deeghan was governor, having a debate that there were a number of doctors working for state government that got paid more than the governor, and now we're back having that conversation 20 years later, 15 years later, whatever it is. So my point is, our state employees work hard, they're dedicated. Generally, our state employees give up the possibility in the private sector of making more money than they make in their careers in state government because they believe in public service. And I don't think we have too many greedy, overpaid state employees out there. Generally, our state employees are working for wages that are competitive or lower than what you would get in the private sector.
Your the finance reports came in yesterday, and I know you're not actively campaigning, but there was were you surprised by any of them?
Not really, no.
No? Your opponent on the Republican side actually went himself about what you did. Is that what it takes to jumpstart a gubernatorial campaign, that much of your own funds?
You have to ask him that.
But that's what you put in, pretty much, you and your extended family, to your own effort.
You know, I was in a, I mean, I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you that, as you will recall, I had a 5-week Democratic primary. I was the last in to that primary. It was pretty widely assumed that I was one of the underdogs going in, and I'd probably be one of the underdogs coming out. The fact that I won that primary by 203 votes speaks to the challenge. So, you know, it always costs more to run a vigorous primary campaign and then a general election at a time when there's no incumbent running. And I think that is a slightly different race than when you're taking on an incumbent of any office in Vermont.
How much do you expect this campaign to cost?
As little as possible to win.
Do you anticipate outside money being a factor again this year?
How are you supposed to know the answer to that question? Because there's a firewall between any outside expenditures and whatever a candidate does. Frankly, that's one reason I'm so concerned about the citizens' decision. I think it's destroying democracy in America, the fact that people can spend millions and millions of dollars, corporations, never identify who spends it, have nothing to do with the candidate or the campaign, and we call this fairness and free speech. Who knows what to predict? All I can tell you is I hope that we continue to defend the integrity of elections in Vermont by doing it the good old-fashioned way, getting out, meeting voters, talking to them, having debates, talking about the issues. I bet Vermonters join me in hoping that doesn't start till Labor Day. I'm willing to help them ensure it doesn't start till Labor Day.
Do you
It's
expect
a
to
vigorous
have-
debate.
Do you expect to have to use your own money this time, or as an incumbent, is the market going to raise money?
I get paid a whole lot less than I used to, so I doubt I'll be spending any of my own money.
More than 800 people have signed on to a petition in support of a moratorium on taser use, including former Governor Madeleine Kunin. has that swayed your stance at all? You've been pretty firm that police should remain using, or at least having tasers. Have you been swayed by that at all, that petition?
No.
Governor, the revenue reports came in recently, and perhaps we didn't do as well as we hoped. And we did okay, but I think at one point people thought our revenues were going to step behind. And I'm just wondering whether or not this is going to affect the board decisions in the week, and what your thoughts are generally about the state of Vermont's economy.
Well, let's talk big picture for a second. We've been now going through 5 consecutive years of extraordinary bad news for jobs, for Vermonters, longest recession in American history, and revenues plummeted. And both the governor and the legislature, the former governor and legislature, were sitting there slashing budgets, seeing revenues plummet, $100 million plus deficits on an annual basis. It was a disaster. I'm proud to say that Vermont seems to have turned a corner, that this was the second fiscal year, and I've had the privilege of managing both of them, where we took in more money than we projected by tens of millions of dollars, and where we had surpluses instead of deficits. That's a great story. What it means is that we are coming back, we're recovering, businesses, instead of laying people off, are hiring, and that Vermont, therefore, has the 4th lowest unemployment rate in America. We have more green jobs per capita than any other state in the country, and we're 8th in business startups. So I'm incredibly optimistic about our jobs future. We've got to stay on track on exactly what we're trying to do. Get healthcare costs under control, get Vermont connected, and from early childhood education to higher education to workforce retraining, be the education state, and I say we'll continue to have good news. Now, obviously, within revenue projections, you can have good months and bad, happy months and sad, and we will continue to see that volatility. It's entirely conceivable that the E-Board will have to upgrade or downgrade $10 million here or there at its next meeting. But I think generally the trend is as follows. We're doing it right in Vermont. Jobs are slowly coming back. We have more work to do, but we should be proud of the progress we've made. After years and years of plummeting revenues and deficits, we're back to small surpluses and revenues that are exceeding expectations, and I'm going to work as hard as I know as governor to continue to make that happen.
To the original grant that will create 150, training slots for visiting nurses, is there demand right now for those 150 people, or will there be?
Absolutely. We have openings right now. It's another area where I keep saying, bring it back to Vermont. You don't have to be an engineer or have a BA or graduate degree to have a job opening in Vermont. We have jobs. We need people back.
How far is it okay to go in a election season in supporting someone from another party?
Well, it's up to you.
But like, for people who are in a party, and are committed to one, is it okay to publicly acknowledge the quality of someone from another party?
I think that's an individual judgment. I can tell you how I see party in elections. What I pride myself for, I hope, as governor, is being a bipartisan governor. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or progressive or independent of my administration. I care about the quality of your character and the ability to get the job done. And I think that's what distinguishes, I think what separates Vermont politics today from the national scene is that we really don't care all that much about party. Now, obviously, parties play a really important role in elections. I'm a Democrat. I support Democrats. Republicans support Republicans. You've got to expect that in elections. But we don't get so hung up on party that we sit there and bicker over it.
But would there be repercussions, or should there be repercussions against someone who gives a nod to someone on the other team?
I think that's an individual judgment that every Vermonter has to make is how loyal they are to party and how much they party switch. Most of us in Vermont shop around on the ballot when we go and vote. I'm not immune to it. I voted for Republicans. I voted for progressives. I
Okay,
voted
now
for
have a
independents.
confession.
I voted for Democrats.
Well, it's kind of
Oh,
interesting.
Sue's getting
because-
nervous now.
It's kind of interesting because if you look at the campaign finance information, it seems like there are some of the same players, you know, on certain teams. And it would appear that Beth Pierce is on the same team you're on, along with other people who get support from certain individuals. And then other people aren't on the team, like perhaps Doug Hoffman and Sandy Gies. And I wondered whether or not you're going to be doing something to help those guys as they're Democrats.
Absolutely. I'll do everything I can for our candidate for auditor and for our candidate for lieutenant governor. That's my job. Thank you.
Susan,